I never thought the same hallway I used to paint birthday cards in would be the same hallway where my daughter cried and asked if her grandma hated her. If you're into revenge stories that go deeper than just getting even, this one might wreck you. Because mine didn't start with fury, it started with silence. Years of it. It was a typical Sunday, not holiday special, not birthday bright, just grey skies and drizzling rain. My 6-year-old daughter, Lyra, was giggling in the kitchen, completely unaware that the house we were in, my parents' rental, was never really a home to me. They called it a family gathering. That's what my mum always texted. Bring Lyra this Sunday. Vanessa will be here. Let's keep the family close. Family close. What she meant was, come, let your sister shine while we quietly remind you that you've never measured up. I came anyway, for Lyra. She still thought the world of them, my parents, her grams and pops. She didn't see how my mom's smile tightened whenever I spoke. She didn't catch how my dad only complimented her when Vanessa wasn't in the room. She didn't notice how her gifts were often forgotten or accidentally swapped with something cheaper. Me? I noticed. I noticed everything. I just stayed quiet because Lyra loved them. And I didn't want to ruin that. I stood in their living room staring at the rug I helped pick out when I was 14. It was still there. Same floral trim, same wine-coloured edge. I used to sit there cross-legged, drawing handmade cards for my dad's birthday. I remember cutting out little hearts from old cereal boxes because we didn't have fancy paper. He laughed and said it was cute but never really looked. Now Lyra danced across that same rug, trying to balance a plastic crown on her curls. She twirled and said, "Gram says I'm her favourite princess." I smiled, my chest clenched. Vanessa breezed in late, as always, long blonde hair, designer trench, and an iced coffee she hadn't paid for. My mum lit up like the 4th of July. "Sweetheart, you're glowing. Is that a new dress? God, you look like a model." No one said a word to me. Vanessa shot me a smirk. "Still wearing that same grey sweater, huh? Vintage sienna." I laughed politely. Lyra didn't catch it, but I did. My ears burned. My dad glanced at me, then back at Vanessa. "I keep telling her some makeup wouldn't hurt, but she says she's focusing on being a good mum." He even used air quotes. I stayed quiet, again. Because what else could I do? Stand up and say, "Hey, I'm doing this alone without a nanny, without alimony, without your help"? I'd done that once before. It only made them roll their eyes. In the kitchen, I made Lyra her favourite, PB&J with the crusts cut off. It was a tiny act of love, but it mattered. She always smiled when I brought it over. "Mommy," she called from the hallway, "Vanessa gave me a gift." I peeked around the corner. Vanessa had tossed a wrapped toy at her like she was feeding a dog. "Don't get used to gifts, sweetie. Your mum's still paying off last month's rent." Lyra giggled, not understanding. I did. I gripped the butter knife in my hand a little tighter. Then came the sound that would split my life in two. A thud, bone rattling, followed by a scream, Lyra's scream. I dropped the sandwich. My legs moved on instinct. I rounded the staircase and saw her, crumpled at the bottom step, one arm twisted weird, her face scraped and red. She wasn't crying yet, she just looked stunned. Then came the pain, the real cry, the kind that splits a mother's soul. And there was Vanessa, at the top of the stairs, arms crossed, unbothered. "She's fine," she said, rolling her eyes. I nudged her. She was being dramatic. God, it was a joke. A joke? My daughter was lying there bleeding and my sister thought it was funny? I scooped Lyra into my arms. "Call 911!" I screamed. My mother didn't move. She was checking the carpet. "She must have slipped. These stairs are old. Maybe teach her to be more careful." I stared. She was pushed. Dad walked in, sighed like I'd dropped a dish. "Kids fall. You always overreact." Overreact? My child was trembling, her arm was swelling. She was clinging to me like I was the only thing left on earth. That was the moment it hit me. They didn't just ignore me, they erased me. And now they were trying to erase her too. That night I sat beside Lyra's hospital bed watching her tiny hand rest in mine. Tubes, stitches, beeping monitors. She should have been home watching cartoons, not lying in a room full of antiseptic. And suddenly, my silence wasn't noble anymore, it was cowardice. I kissed her forehead, and I made a promise, not out loud, not with rage, just a whisper in my gut. You won't get to hurt her again. Not like you hurt me, not like you think you can. I won't just cut you off. I'll make sure you never forget what you did, no matter how much you pretend it was just a joke. I knew the sound of my daughter's cry, not the whiny, tired kind, not the pretend one she'd do when she wanted candy. This one clawed through my chest like something primal. I had her in my arms before the second scream finished echoing. She was so light, too light, like her bones didn't know what to do with the pain yet. Her little fingers gripped my sweater. Blood was dripping down her forehead. Her elbow was swelling. I was shaking, trying to keep my voice steady. Lyra, baby, look at me. I've got you. Mommy's here. My mum appeared at the top of the stairs, not even in a rush. She didn't ask if Lyra was okay. She didn't kneel or panic or run. She just said, the rug might have bunched up again. I told your father to tack it down. I looked at her like she had grown horns. The rug? Vanessa was right behind her, arms folded, not a shred of guilt on her face. She was yelling too much, so I nudged her. Chill. She's not made of glass. She's 6, I screamed. She's dramatic, Vanessa said with a shrug. She fell weird. Not my fault. I was about to yell again when I realized my dad was standing by the entryway watching, doing nothing. He saw the blood, saw the child in my arms. And what did he say? Kids fall. You always take things too far, Sienna. I turned and headed for the car, Screw waiting for them. I wasn't going to ask for their help ever again. I strapped Lyra into the back seat, gently, slowly, while she whimpered. The whole drive to the hospital she kept whispering, "Why did Auntie push me?" I didn't have an answer. I didn't want to lie. So I held her hand and said, because sometimes grown-ups don't act like grown-ups. At the ER, the nurse took one look and rushed her in. I stayed back, signing forms, hands still shaking. When the doctor finally let me in, Lyra had stitches on her forehead and her elbow wrapped in a soft cast. "She's lucky," he said. "No concussion, just bruising and a hairline fracture. Could have been a lot worse. Could have been. Should have never happened." That night, as Lyra slept beside me in the hospital bed, curled up like she was trying to disappear, I stared at the ceiling and replayed it all in my mind. Vanessa laughing, my mother checking the carpet, my dad saying I was overreacting. And the one thing that broke me? Lyra's question. Does Grandma hate me? Let me ask you something. If a 6-year-old gets pushed down a flight of stairs and the first thing her grandmother does is check the damn rug, not her heartbeat, would you still bring your child back there? Seriously, would you? Because in that moment I needed someone to tell me I wasn't crazy. And maybe that's you. Maybe that's someone watching right now. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done if it were your kid? Because I know what I should have done years ago. But I didn't snap. Not yet. Not out loud. I sat there in that stiff blue chair, holding Lyra's warm little fingers while a machine beeped steadily behind us. And that's when I knew this wasn't the first time. Not the first time they'd ignored pain. Not the first time they'd rewritten the story. When I was 9, I fell off the porch and hit my jaw. Vanessa had pushed me, just playing rough. My mum told the neighbours I'd tripped on my own shoelace. I remembered that. I remembered the silence that followed, the dinner table that night, the way no one mentioned it, not once. This time would be different. I went to the nurse's station, asked for the printout of Lyra's chart, took pictures of every stitch, every bruise. Then I asked if they had security footage from the entrance hallway. They said yes. It was grainy. No sound. But it was clear enough. Vanessa behind Lyra, a shove, a fall. I sent a copy to myself, saved it in 3 places. Then I called my mom. She didn't even ask how Lyra was doing. "You're really going to make this into a thing?" she said. She was probably off balance. You can't blame Vanessa for your child's weak bones. And just like that, any flicker of hope I had left, gone. I hung up, looked at Lyra. She was awake now, drowsy, but her eyes were open. "You're safe now," I whispered. "I promise." And this time, I wasn't just saying it. I meant it. Not just safe from Vanessa, not just safe from that house, but safe from the people who raised me to believe I was overreacting. Every single time I told the truth. I stayed awake the whole night, not just because of the hospital lighting or the plastic couch, but because every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lyra falling again. And I saw my mum, fingertips brushing the rug like it mattered more than the child bleeding at her feet. By morning, Lyra was a little more alert. She tried to smile, probably thinking I needed it more than she did. "Does this mean no school today?" she asked, her voice raspy. I forced a laugh. "Yes, sweetheart. Doctor's orders." She blinked. "And no more going to Graham's house?" I paused. That one hurt. I reached over, tucked her hair behind her ear. "Not for a while," I said softly. She nodded, then looked out the window. Just quiet. I sat there, hand in hers, and realized something so simple it cracked me open. She was waiting for me to protect her. Not just from scraped knees or bullies, but from the people who thought they were above consequence. I called my job, told them I needed a few days off. They asked if I could zoom in. I said no. First time I ever said no and didn't apologize for it. Next, I called a locksmith. For my own apartment, not theirs. I just needed a reset, a signal to myself that this chapter was done. Then I opened a blank page in my phone's notes app. Title: Things They Did and I Let Slide. It started simple. Vanessa pushing me when I was 9, Dad calling me clingy when I cried after my first heartbreak, Mum throwing away Lyra's birthday gift because we already have too much junk. But once I started, I couldn't stop. The list poured out like it had been waiting years, 34 bullet points in 20 minutes. And the worst part? Every single one felt normal at the time. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I stood in the kitchen, lights off, just staring at the blinking microwave clock, 3:02 a.m. Then something shifted. I remembered a quote from a support group I'd once sat in on when a friend invited me. Sometimes forgiveness is just permission to do it again. And I realized I'd been giving them that permission for years. They told me I was dramatic, I apologized, they mocked how I dressed, I laughed with them. They pushed my daughter down the stairs, I was done. People talk about defining moments like they're loud, like they come with lightning bolts and screaming. But mine came in stillness, a quiet kitchen, my child sleeping safe behind a locked door. And the word enough settling into my chest like a final brick in a long wall. I didn't want revenge, not in the petty sense. I wanted something bigger, stronger, unforgettable. I grabbed an old file box from the closet. Inside was every tax return invoice and savings printout from the last 6 years. 6 years of scraping by, working 2 jobs, babysitting during weekends, freelancing at night after Lyra fell asleep. I did it all while being told I was a burden, a mess, a charity case. But what they didn't know, what no one knew, was that I hadn't wasted those years. I'd invested, slowly, carefully, quietly. There was one property in particular I'd been eyeing, a duplex in a neighbourhood near Lyra's school. I'd already run the numbers with an old college friend who worked in real estate, but in that moment I wasn't thinking of buying a new place. I was thinking about that place. My parents' house. Well, technically not theirs. They rented, always had. The same sweet old woman named Mara had owned it for decades. She once told me during a family dinner that dealing with difficult tenants was wearing her down. She had no idea I was her tenant's daughter. I made a plan, not rash, not angry, just sharp. I'd reach out to Mara, under a different name, a neutral tone. I'd offer her above market value, cash if needed, close in 30 days. I wouldn't even mention my parents. Let the paperwork do the talking, because when this was done, I wouldn't just be walking away. I'd be walking back in, with keys. I stared at the calendar on my fridge, the days I had circled for grocery sales and daycare pickups. This time I circled something else. Take it back. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous, and not in a way that hurt people, but in a way that said, you should have been kinder to the quiet one. There's something terrifying about acting calm when you're not, like calling a woman you've known since childhood and pretending you've never met her, like emailing under a fake name and signing with a new Gmail account, like hiding the fact that you're not buying property, you're buying power. I told myself it wasn't personal, it was protection. And maybe that's what made it so easy to play the part. Her name was Mara Tenley. She was in her late 70s and had owned my parents' rental house for over 40 years. She always wore long cardigans, kept hard peppermint in her pockets, and smelled like powdered soap. As a kid, I thought she was lovely. As an adult, I remembered her saying one thing that changed everything. Managing tenants isn't what it used to be. You try to be kind, but kindness gets mistaken for weakness. That sentence came back to me like a thread finally finding its knot. I reached out through a generic real estate contact form using the name Erin Glass. I made up a small investment firm, nothing flashy, just something that sounded serious enough to be real, but small enough not to scare her. My first email was polite, professional. Hello, Ms. Tenley. I'm looking to purchase a small residential property in your area. I came across 1429 Magnolia Drive and was wondering if you'd be open to selling. I'm prepared to offer above market value and can close within 30 days. She replied within hours. Said she'd been thinking about selling for a while, that the current tenants were not difficult, but not exactly easy either. I almost laughed. We met for coffee at a small bakery downtown. She wore pearls and smiled kindly. I kept my hair tucked in a low bun and wore no makeup, just in case she recognized me. She didn't. We talked like strangers. I listened as she vented about how the lawn was never properly mowed, how the daughter, aka my mum, always paid rent late and blamed the banking app. She said she was tired, said she wanted to travel more, visit her sister in Maine. I nodded sympathetically. Would it be okay if I walked the property just once before we move forward? I asked. Of course, she smiled. They won't even notice. I'll let them know someone from the firm is stopping by. The irony nearly made me choke. The next day, I walked through the house I grew up in, this time wearing sunglasses and carrying a clipboard. My mum barely looked up from her phone. My dad grunted hello. They had no idea who I was. It was surreal, like slipping into a parallel universe where you're a stranger in your own story. I took notes in my phone, not about the plumbing or the floorboards, but about how this house felt now. Cold, soulless. It wasn't home anymore, and that was what made it so easy to take it from them. I offered Mara 10% above market, cash. Told her I'd handle all closing fees if we could skip the inspection. She agreed, happily. We signed the paperwork in under 2 weeks, just like that. I owned the house my parents lived in, the one where they raised me with just enough food but never enough love. The one where I learned to disappear quietly, to swallow my words before they made things worse. The one where my daughter's blood had soaked into the stairs, and now it was mine. I didn't tell anyone, not even Lyra. I kept showing up to family things like nothing changed, still smiled politely, still brought a dish, still sat in the corner and watched Vanessa tell the same stories over wine, my dad nodding along, my mum commenting on my lack of style. They had no clue. I had the deed in my purse. I had power they couldn't smell yet. And that silence, it was delicious. There's something deeply satisfying about letting people believe they've won, while you rewrite the ending behind their backs. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving a point. It was about reclaiming something they stole without even noticing, my right to feel safe. The final straw came on a Saturday. Vanessa threw a birthday party for her daughter, and we were invited, last minute of course. Lyra and I showed up with a small wrapped gift. She was wearing her favourite dress, the one with the unicorn stitched on the front. Vanessa took one look and said, "Oh, I forgot you were coming." She pointed to the far wall. "There's no room at the table. You two can sit over there, like last time." "The floor, next to the trash bin," my mum muttered, loud enough for me to hear. Well, Lyra should learn humility. Can't always expect royal treatment. I didn't yell, I didn't cry, I just smiled, kissed Lyra on the head, took her hand, and walked out. Back in the car, I made a call. 3 words. "Serve the papers." I didn't flinch when the papers went out. No guilt, no second thoughts, just a quiet, cold calm, like the kind you get when you finally shut a door that should have been closed years ago. The eviction notices hit their mailbox on a Tuesday. Standard envelope. Nothing dramatic. Inside, a simple letter, typed and signed by the new property owner, me. They had 30 days to vacate the house I grew up in, the one they used as a stage for humiliation and control, the one they never owned. My mum called first. I let it ring, then ring again. Finally, I picked up. Her voice was already shaky. "Sienna, we just got some nonsense letter. Is this a joke? Did Vanessa put you up to this?" "Nope," I said. "Then who bought the house?" she snapped. I didn't answer. "Sienna." Still quiet. She hung up. Next was Vanessa. Of course. "You think this is funny?" she barked. "Dad's blood pressure is through the roof. You know he can't handle stress." "Oh," I said calmly, like the stress Lyra felt falling down a staircase. She huffed. "That was a joke. She overreacted. You're seriously evicting your entire family because your kid cried too hard?" I didn't bother replying. She texted an hour later. "I hope you're proud of yourself. You ruined everything." I didn't answer that either. Then came the one I knew would hurt the most, my dad. He called just after dinner that night. "Sienna, tell me this isn't you," he said flatly. I didn't say a word. "I always said you were sensitive, but this..." He paused. "This is cruelty." I finally spoke. "No," I said. "This is clarity." They didn't believe it until I pulled into the driveway 4 days later, in a tailored navy pantsuit, hair up, keys in hand, and a locksmith waiting beside me. They were all standing on the porch. Mum, Dad, Vanessa, and her husband Mark. Faces pale, arms crossed, acting like I was the intruder. Mum stepped forward first. "You can't be serious," she whispered. "This is your home. You grew up here." I looked her dead in the eye. "No," I said. "This was your throne. Now it's your eviction." She blinked, stunned. Dad muttered something under his breath, probably about ungrateful daughters and disrespect. Vanessa stormed forward, hands balled into fists. "You're ruining everything over some bratty kid who can't handle a fall." I tilted my head. "You kicked my daughter down a staircase," I said slowly, "then blamed the carpet, then blamed me, and now you want mercy?" She laughed bitterly. "So what? You're just going to toss us on the street? Over drama?" I leaned in, close enough for her to smell the peppermint tea on my breath. "No," I whispered. "I'm going to watch you pack, box by box, and when you ask for help, I'll remind you exactly what you reminded Lyra, that we're not family." The locksmith popped the front door open. I stepped inside. They didn't follow. Over the next few weeks, I watched them unravel, from a distance, of course, but close enough to see the panic turn to bitterness, bitterness to silence. Vanessa stopped posting on social media entirely. No more brunch selfies. No more "had blessed" captions. Mum stopped calling. But I heard from mutual acquaintances that she'd been trying to leave furniture behind during the move. Sentimental items, she said. I told the lawyer not to accept anything. This house wasn't her memory box. It was my future. And every inch of it had to be cleaned of them. Dad tried one last time. He came by while I was overseeing some early renovations, leaning on a cane he didn't need 6 months ago. You always were dramatic, he said. But this is a new low. I didn't respond. He tried again. We raised you. I met his eyes. You raised me to survive you. The final day of their lease came and went. By noon, the house was empty. Echoing. No voices. No judgments. No passive-aggressive silences. Just clean air and the faint scent of new paint. I walked through each room with Lyra at my side. She looked older somehow, not in a sad way, in a wise way. Is this ours now? She asked. I looked at her eyes so full of hope, so clear. No, sweetheart, I said, this is our closure. And that's the thing people don't always understand about revenge stories. Sometimes they're not about fire and rage. Sometimes they're about standing still while the people who tried to break you get a front row seat to your quiet strength. That night, Lyra and I had a picnic on the living room floor. No furniture, just a blanket and sandwiches. She giggled when a piece of bread fell on her lap. I laughed too. We weren't scared anymore. And for the first time in my entire life, I felt what I never did growing up in that house. Safe. I didn't keep the house. That surprises a lot of people when I tell them. But it was never about living there again. That house held too many ghosts. Not the kind with chains and rattling footsteps, the kind that sits quietly in corners, whispering things you almost believe. You're overreacting. You're not enough. This is just how families are. So instead I rebuilt it, not with a hammer, but with intention. I partnered with a local non-profit that helps single mothers and children who've experienced emotional, physical, or family-based trauma. They were underfunded, under-resourced, and blown away when I offered them a fully paid property. Not just a shelter, a sanctuary. We renovated every inch. The upstairs became therapy rooms, the basement, a quiet emergency shelter, the kitchen, a communal space with a giant chalkboard wall where kids can draw freely. No judgment, no don't touch that. We named it Lyra's Light, after my daughter, after the brightest thing that ever came from a family that tried so hard to dim me. News of the project spread fast. Local press picked it up first. Daughter buys childhood home and turns it into safe haven for families in crisis. Then the video went viral. People shared it with captions like, "This is how you break the cycle." She didn't just heal, she helped others heal too. Comments flooded in from daughters, mothers, women I'd never met. One said, "I watched this and finally packed my bags." Another wrote, "My mother said the same thing about my daughter's bruises. Thank you for speaking up." We held the grand opening on a bright spring morning, fresh flowers out front, balloons tied to the railing, dozens of volunteers, smiling kids running barefoot across a lawn that once felt like a battlefield. And then I saw them across the street. My parents, standing beneath a dying elm tree, my father leaning on a cane, my mother in a faded coat, mascara already smudged. Vanessa wasn't with them. I found out later she'd tried to sue me for emotional damages. The court tossed it out with laughter. Apparently, there's not much sympathy for women who shove children down staircases and call it a joke. My mum tried to wave. I didn't wave back. She took a step forward. "Is this really necessary?" she asked softly, not crossing the line onto the property. I looked at her, looked at both of them. "You left my daughter crying on tile with a fractured arm," I said. "You defended her abuser. You mocked her pain. You erased mine for decades." My father scowled. We raised you. I nodded. You raised me to survive you. Then I turned around and walked back into a building filled with light, laughter, and the soft sounds of healing. Months passed. I never heard from them again. No birthday texts, no let's talk, just silence. And honestly, it felt peaceful. One afternoon, I was sitting in the small garden behind Lyra's light. Sun filtering through the trees, wind moving slow. A woman approached me, nervous, holding a baby on her hip. She said, "I saw your story. I was afraid to leave my husband, but then I watched that video of you and your daughter, and I realized if she could survive that, so could we." I didn't know what to say at first, but I looked over at Lyra, now laughing on the swings with 2 other girls, no cast, no bruises, no fear, just joy. And I realized I didn't just evict my family from a house, I evicted their power. I took back my voice. I built something they never could, a life without cruelty, a space without shame, a home without fear. Sometimes healing doesn't look like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like boundaries that don't budge. Sometimes it looks like a door that stays closed no matter how long they knock. And sometimes it looks like your daughter laughing in the exact place she once bled. So now I want to ask you something. What would you have done if your child got pushed and no one called for help? If your own parents looked at a rug instead of a wound, would you have stayed? Would you have kept smiling at Sunday dinner? Let me know in the comments. I'm not asking for judgment, just honesty, because someone else might read your answer and realize they're not alone.